Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu nirāmayāh, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaścid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. Om Shanno Mitraha Sham Varunaha Shanno Bhavatvaryama Shanna Indro Brihaspatihi Shanno Vishnurukramaha Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayu Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva pratyaksham brahma vadishyami Śrutaṁ vadishyami Satyam vadishyami Tanmām avatu Tadvaktāram avatu Avatu mām avatu vaktāram Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shanti. You get something for you to sit. Nice to have you back after so many years. Okay. So I'm still spending some time introducing the third Shanti Mantra, the third mantra for peace, which is addressed to Om. This monosyllable, which lies at the beginning and mostly also at the end of each and every mantra. In our last class, we discussed the importance of pronouncing it in the beginning and at the end of every session in which we explore ourselves. Today I want to go a little bit deeper into the application and the meaning of this symbol. Because ultimately, a symbol only becomes meaningful when we understand its purpose, when we understand its significance, when we understand its meaning. Otherwise, it's of no use. Lately, I have come to experience something about this monosyllable, which again gets confirmed by this mantra. I just noticed this today morning as I was thinking about meditating, contemplating on this mantra. I have been doing what I understand as Japa. As I look back in my life, I can remember for the first time, it was most likely in December 1999, many, many years ago, when I for the first time discovered, at least that is how I remember it now, discovered for the first time the joy. And by joy I understand a peaceful state of mind in which we feel elevated, nothing lacking, and just very peaceful. The joy of meditating, contemplating the mantras, just choosing any one of the mantra. 1999 was basically the time when I was nearly at the end of my 12 years course in Kailasashram. I had memorized quite a lot of passages of the Upanishads. And I was traveling on foot with my father in the state of Gujarat from Dwarka to Somnath. And I remember one day, first we were traveling just along the road, and then one day we reached this beautiful ancient temple of the Divine Mother Amba. And as I was climbing up the temple, on the other side I could see the beautiful, immense, infinite ocean early in the morning, and the sun shining over it. And then I told to my father, why are we walking on foot along the road, which is such a busy street with so many cars and such a noise sometimes. Of course, India was far more peaceful back then than it is today. But why not let us walk in the sands of the beach? Just walk along the beach, up to Somnath, which was around 200 kilometers from Dwarka. So then my father said, okay, let's do it, let's try it. So for days together, we walked just completely in the sand of the ocean, the Arabic Sea. And usually in the afternoons, till 12 o'clock, we used to walk on foot, and then we used to take bath in the ocean, and then just relax, lie down in the sun. And those were the moments when I remember I just used to choose. I had the Kena Upanishad, the second Upanishad with me. It's a small Upanishad, so it was not a lot of burden, because we had to carry everything ourselves. And just used to choose one mantra and used to meditate on that. And what I started then has become, over the years, the primary method, the technique. There's so many techniques of practicing meditation, but this is my way of practicing meditation. And so whenever there are peaceful moments, and only recently I read about Eknath Easwaran. It was just a few months ago, and read about his idea of what he calls passage meditation, in which he chose passages from all the different wisdom traditions, from the Upanishads, from the Gita, from the Vedas, from Sufism, from so many different wisdom traditions, and used to teach how to meditate and contemplate on them. Eknath Easwaran was a great meditation master. I think the first master to introduce a formal system of training into meditation into the American universities in the 1960s. So I just call it Japa, what he calls passage meditation. I think that is what, when Patanjali uses the word Japa, when Patanjali uses the word svadhyaya in the second chapter, the way the masters explain Japa and explain svadhyaya, these two words, that is what I understand by it. What it does, that it induces a very content state of mind, a state of mind in which a person becomes capable of experiencing the pristine state of consciousness. It leads towards silence. Now I'm using the words of Maharshi Shaunaka, one of the great rishis, who speaks about this, that it leads towards silence as long as a person meditates on the meaning and on the significance of the mantra. Not on the words, but on the meaning, on the significance, on the quintessence of what those words are trying to convey. But a person needs to practice it without a sense of hurrying about it. It cannot be done when we are in a state of hurrying, in a state of hurry. Then it doesn't work. A person has to be in a relaxed state. And sometimes, of course, also for the practice of meditation, boredom initially comes. Later on, as we go deeper, it becomes more and more interesting, and a person really gets pulled into it. But initially, that fight against boredom is extremely important. But these are the things that strengthen this japa, Maharshi Shaunaka says. Now what I lately have started to discover, I could call it discover or experience or understand, is that like when we had this course with Zubin, one of the important things that he pointed out about particular asanas such as Shirshasana, that you can practice so many different kinds of asanas within Shirshasana itself. The same things can be practiced, which we practice in so many different asanas. If we would practice just Shirshasana correctly for a very long time, then all that can be practiced within one asana itself. And that is why when Guruji was asked that since all of us have very limited time, if we cannot practice many asanas, there are so many asanas, 84 classical asanas, and endless developments and evolutions of those asanas. The list seems endless. But then if we can't practice all of them, we live such a busy life, then what should we do? Then he said, even just 3 asanas, Adho-mukha Svanasana, Shirshasana, and Sarvangasana. These 3 asanas. This is how he explained. And even within Shirshasana itself, I'm finding myself unable to explain it the way he explained it actively through the whole class. But he really showed that how within Shirshasana itself, all the different standing postures, inversions, all the backbends, everything can be practiced within Shirshasana itself. The same thing is true about meditating on Om. One can meditate on so many different mantras for years and years together. But then slowly and slowly at some point, a person has to transcend this net of words, as it is sometimes called in Sanskrit language, Shabda Jala. Jala. Jala is the Sanskrit word for net. Net with which, for example, fishermen catches fishes. So that's a net, in which a fish gets entangled. So similarly, words are like nets in which we get entangled. So initially, yes, they are extremely helpful. But at some point, a person slowly and slowly has to go beyond it. And from all these mantras, as a person slowly and slowly moves towards Mantra Raja, what I called the king of all mantras, what the masters call the king of all mantras, I talked about it in the last class, we start to realize that how, when we understand Om in its depth, the essence of each and every mantra, the seed of each and every mantra, is to be found within this mantra itself. This is the depth and the breadth that this mantra has. And this is what when we will study this third mantra, when it points out that which has emerged from the hymns as the very essence, and when we will discuss the meaning of this passage, we will see that how even for the ancient Vedic masters, this Om was really the quintessence mantra, in the very sense that each and every mantra, the quintessence of each and every mantra was to be found within it. And let me remind that ultimately, this is the last mantra, because this is the mantra which then opens the door to complete silence through that end in M, after which silence is inevitable, about which we talked in our previous class. There was also a question in the last class, what is the traditional way of pronouncing it? And I said I will answer that question in the next class. And I wanted to just go through the passages that describe how to pronounce it. So, just wanted to confirm. So the traditional way of pronouncing it, particularly during one's own meditation, is to pronounce O for 3 beats, which means prolonged, and M 1.5 beats, which means half of the length of O. The way we pronounce it is usually referred to as Shanmatrika, the one with 6 matras. 6 matras. So we pronounce it for 6 beats, and then we ought to give half to M, half of it to M, which means 3 beats to M. So now it's a very precise measurement, and because that is how the masters used to measure their pranayama. When we study the Yoga Sutras, we see how the masters used to measure the length of the inhalation, exhalation, and retention. So they were very technical and scientific, because what is science? Science is measurements. So they were very much scientific about these things. So this is just their view. Yes. Now, last time I started speaking about the two applications of this Om. The first application was, as we saw, for students in the beginning of their classes and at the end of their classes, just to settle down as a form of pranayama. Then the second application of Om is in meditation. So I want to talk about that a little bit. Even texts like texts of Hatha Yoga, such as Ghiranda Samhita, speaks about meditating on light while pronouncing Om. So even texts on Hatha Yoga. And what we find in the Upanishads is that Omiti Atmanam Yunjita. Meditate on yourself through pronouncing Om. So Om becomes like a tool. When the Upanishadic masters say through Om, then it means that Om was being used as a tool, as an instrument. And it is this idea, how does Om work as a tool and as an instrument in the context, in the understanding of in the practice of meditation. So there are two ways. Either one treats Om simply as a mantra, and meditates on its significance. This is what Patanjali speaks about. That Japa, after he speaks about Om, in the first chapter, he says, Tat Japa, meditation on that, Tat Japa, pronunciation of that, and Tadartha Bhavanam, and meditating on its meaning. So pronouncing it so that it creates a state of mind, a peaceful state of mind, and then while pronouncing it, meditating on its meaning, on its significance. This is what he speaks about. And then he says, Tataha pratyak chetana adhigamaha. From that arises an awareness of consciousness within. These are his words. So the way Patanjali applies Om is simply as a mantra to be pronounced, but then to meditate on its meaning, on its significance, on what it is pointing. So, in other words, Om is being used as a pointer, and by using it as a pointer, the person meditates on that which is being pointed at. So if Om is like a finger, then one uses Om to meditate on that which is being pointed at by that finger. That is one way of applying Om into one's practice of meditation. There is another way. which is even more simple, which is even more basic, is to meditate on Om itself as a symbol of the divine. Like people use statues or different types of symbols, treating this as a symbol. That is why earlier, now we can, to understand the distinction, what I said earlier, to use Om simply as a pointer and meditate on that which is being pointed by it. But of course, even for that, we have to have a deeper understanding first of what Om really means. But before we don't have that deeper understanding of what Om stands for, still Om itself can be used as a sound symbol. The sound itself can be used to meditate upon, or the image can be used to practice retention, to practice one's focus by attempting to focus oneself on that, by choosing that as an object. Then it is like not meditating on that which is being pointed at by the finger, but meditating on the finger itself. That's the difference. This is just a stage. This doesn't mean that we have to, we continue to meditate for the rest of our life just on the finger and fail to see what is being pointed at. It's just a stage, just to make things a little more simple, a little simpler, that's all. Rather than meditating on that which is being pointed at, but meditating on the pointer itself. So that is why the masters, in the master's language, the difference of using Om in two ways. They say Om either can be used as an alambana. An alambana is just the Sanskrit word for a prop. For a prop. Alambana is the Sanskrit word for prop. Something that you use to hang yourself. Sounds funny, but each one of us will understand what it means. Not hanging oneself, but hanging oneself. Alambana. Just to tag one's mind, to give it something on which it can hang itself. That's all. A tag, something like that. So either it can be used as an alambana, or it can be used as a pratika which means a symbol. So either as a pointer or as an object itself. Both ways are used for the practice of meditation, and this mantra which we are about to study treats Om, the pointer, as a symbol to that which is being pointed at. And that is why whatever we want to say or ask from that which is being pointed at can also be asked to that which is pointing at it. It is only for this reason that when we bow down in front of Patanjali, or when we pray to Patanjali, it is only meaningful in that sense, because this is just a statue. Is it meaningful to pray in front of a piece of stone? Is it? It is and it isn't. If we just think that it is a piece of stone, if that's all that we see, then of course it's of no use. But if we realize that this piece of stone symbolizes something deeper within ourselves and points towards that, and we are just using this image, the pointer, as a substitute, as an external substitute, as a tangible substitute for that which is being pointed at, then we can also direct our prayer, our adoration, our respect, and everything to that. As long as we don't get deluded by the limitation. If we get deluded by the limitation and we think that this is all there is, and we fail ultimately to reach that which is pointing at, then this becomes a trap. So, but with that awareness, with that understanding, it cannot be a trap, with that deeper understanding. So the point that I'm trying to make that we find in the Upanishads both types of applications. Sometimes we find Om simply as an alambana, as a prop, which is used to meditate so that one can meditate on that which is being pointed at. And sometimes Om itself, because back then there were no statues. Most likely there were no statues thousands and thousands of years ago. But simply this sound itself was being used by the masters as a symbol for the practice of retention. What in Ashtanga Yoga, in the eight-limbed path of yoga, we call dhāraṇo, to hold one's mind on something. They used the sound of Om as an object on which they could hold their mind. They could practice dhāraṇa upon. So these were the two applications which we find in the Upanishadic practices of meditation. Because what in yoga we call dhyana, it's a very famous word, dhyana, which becomes Chang in China and then became Zen when it reached Japan. And with Zen, as in that version, the word dhyana has become such a famous word, dhyana. The Upanishads also use the word dhyana, but they use another word, upasana, which is closer to the word asana. It's just upa-asana, upasana, to close, to sit close. That's all. Like the word Upanishad itself also means to sit close. Upasana also means to sit close to oneself. And they used this word for all the kinds of practices, all the kinds of meditation practices that one can find in those sections of the Vedas that are known as the Aranyakas, which means that are to be studied and taught in forests, which are peaceful because they are meditative teachings, from which then unfold the last section of the Upanishads, the last section of the Vedas, known as the Upanishads, or also known as Vedanta, the culmination, the quintessence of the Vedas, of wisdom, the Upanishads that we are studying. Even though grammatically Upanishad and Upasana both mean the same thing, to sit close, their technical application is very different. As long as we meditate on something out of faith, it is called upasana. And when we meditate on it naturally, out of experience, it becomes Upanishad. This is the difference. So for example, if somebody meditates on Tattvamasi, you are that, or Aham Brahmasmi, I am that pure consciousness, simply out of faith, because the masters have said it, because the master has given us this mantra, so we meditate on that. Not that we have experienced it, but we just have faith in it. And therefore, we meditate on it. We use it as a method of meditation, as a mantra for meditation. But it's not based on experience. It is simply based on faith in the Master's teaching. Then it is called upasana. Always whatever one practices based on faith is called upasana. Then it's not Upanishad. Upanishad becomes when we meditate thus naturally, because that is how we experience the truth to be. So that is the difference. Even though both mean to sit close to oneself, the technical application of both words in the context of the Upanishads is different. One is faith-based and the other one is experience-based. The faith-based one is just a step, and the experience-based one is the goal. This is just a step, a method, a means, an instrument. That's all. So like this mantra that we can recite it today, this is addressed to Om because it treats Om, the pointer, as a symbol to that which it is pointing at. There are not many passages like this, because this approach is a very basic approach. So most of the Upanishadic passages simply use Om as a pointer. But this is one of those passages where the pointer has been used as a symbol to that which is being pointed at. And therefore, the prayer is directly addressed to the pointer itself. So let us pronounce this mantra. Om, 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 chandasām, chandasām, ṛṣabho, 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 viśva-rūpaḥ, 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 Chandobhyo, 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 ādhyamṛtāt, 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 sambabhūva, 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 mendro, 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 medhayā, 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 spṛṇotu, 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 Amṛtasya, 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 deva, 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 dhāraṇo, dhāraṇo, bhūyāsam, 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 Śarīraṁ, 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 me vicarṣaṇam, me vicarṣaṇam, me vicarṣaṇam, Jihvā, 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 me madhumattamā, me madhumattamā, me madhumattamā, Karnābhyāṁ, 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 bhūri, 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 viśruvam, 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 Brahmaṇaḥ, 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 kośo'si, 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 medhayā, 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 pihitaḥ, 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 Śrutaṁ, 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 me gopāya, me gopāya, me gopāya. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om chandasām ṛṣabho viśva-rūpaḥ Chandobhyo'dhyamṛtāt sambabhūva mendro medhayā spṛṇotu Amṛtasya deva dhāraṇo bhūyāsam Śarīraṁ me vicarṣaṇam Jihvā me madhumattamā Karnābhyāṁ bhūri viśruvam Brahmaṇaḥ kośo'si medhayā pihitaḥ Śrutaṁ me gopāya. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So the first sentence, chandasām ṛṣabha, that which is the most excellent, the greatest of all the hymns, of all the mantras. Another very ancient word for mantra is chandas, which has been used here. I explained the meaning of mantra a long while ago. Just let me remind it. Mantra. Man means to meditate, to think, to contemplate. And tra means protection. That which protects one when one meditates on that, when one contemplates on its meaning. That is called mantra. Another very ancient word for mantra is chandas. Chandas is a beautiful word. First of all, because it has a beautiful meaning, it means freedom. That's one of the meanings of the word. Chanda. In Hindi language, we use the word swachanda. Swachanda. Somebody who follows his own inner call, doesn't care what others think, doesn't care what others tell him. He's just swachanda. In Hindi language, it even has a negative connotation. In modern Hindi language, it has started to have a negative connotation, because it is like somebody who is completely callous, who doesn't care what others tell him. He just does what his heart tells him. And such a person can be socially quite problematic. So the Hindi word swachanda still has that meaning of the Sanskrit word chandas in it. Someone who follows his chandas, who is not bound to something else, but is completely free. So first of all, the meaning of the word chandas is freedom, and the second meaning of the word, in the sense in which it is also, it simply means chadayati, that which gives a covering of protection. Again, the same meaning that is implied in the word mantra. And when we speak of protection, in the practice of meditation, what do we want to protect ourselves against? Just so that our mind does not wander here and there in all the different directions, what Patanjali would call vikshepa, a scattered state of mind. Just protection from that. That's all. And so, chandas, and of course then there are elaborate mythological stories which one finds in some sections of the Upanishads, that when the radiant beings were frightened from death, they found protection by hiding themselves in these mantras, and that's why these mantras were called chandas. Story created to remember the meaning of words. So the word chandas is another word for mantra, which is a beautiful word. Yash chandasām ṛṣabho. That which is, and ṛṣabho means foremost. For example, in the Bhagavad Gita, often Sri Krishna addresses Arjuna as Purusha-ṛṣabho, foremost of all human beings, the greatest of all human beings. So ṛṣabho has that meaning, to be foremost. And it also means, it has also the sense of something that has the seed of everything in it. That also significance comes into the Sanskrit word. And these things can only be explained when we study Patanjali's grammar and Panini's grammar. We learn to analyze words, and they help us to meditate on words. Because these words contain so much within themselves, with the awareness then that one doesn't need to get entangled in them. One can still enjoy the beauty of how much the masters have put into these words and the depth of these words. It is sometimes amazing when a person starts unfolding the depth of these words just by contemplating and meditating on them, by using the words itself as an object to retain one's mind, just to meditate, contemplate on that. It is beautiful. So we'll come back to this mantra, the next word, viśva-rūpaḥ, which means that which is present in all forms. It is about the all-embracing nature of Om, the next word. We'll come back to this. Still, if there are any questions or any comments in relation to what we have discussed today or earlier in connection with Om, please feel free to share your own experiences. What do you feel when you pronounce Om? Do you feel that it gives some peace of mind, the kind of peace of mind that we talked about, which is essential to understand when we practice asana, to observe, because even just to observe what is happening in our body, what is happening in our breath, what is happening in our mind. Otherwise, our asana practice will become very mechanical. Without that, it is going to become very mechanical. And after some time, lose interest in that. But this is what adds joy to it when we start observing and we start enjoying that observing. And this is something that we don't even need our asana practice. One can observe in the same way one can observe the effect of the mantras on one's body, on one's breath, on one's mind. Each and every mantra, when we understand it, the kind of mental state that it induces has effect on our mind. And because it has effect on our mind, it has some effect on our breathing. It calms down our breathing. It calms down our body. But all these things have to be observed with a keen sense of observation. Yes.
I know when Om is the one syllable where if I breathe properly and I do it properly, I feel vibration. I feel like if you've ever seen a tuning fork, when you strike it,
Yes.
and then after it's like this, I really feel in here. And for me, it helps me feel more calm, and a little bit I feel some kind of resonance inside of me. So it's one thing but it doesn't happen so often. It's only when I somehow extend my side trunks properly, which I don't do so much.
It's very much like the effect of gong.
Yeah, exactly. It's
You know?
the same, yeah.
Yes. Very true. Yes.
Same doesn't happen so often, but sometimes before class, especially when there's time to settle down. To feel the Om, the vibration from the inside of the spine.
Yes.
Loosening, releasing from the inside of the spine outwards.
Yes. Yes. The vibration itself of this monosyllable is extremely powerful. And I was thinking that, you see, breath and the sound emanates from the diaphragm and then really travels through the throat, reaches up here, and then the vibrations that it generates even affect the mind. So I was thinking, in a way, you have the heart and the mouth, and then ultimately the brain. It touches the heart, it touches an organ of action, the mouth, and then ultimately it touches even the mind. So it affects all the three parts of our being. So there are different ways of looking at it. Any other observation or thoughts or questions? Yes.
Question. Last week you talked about how if you pronounce on that's incorrect. It's not, that spelling isn't phonetic, so the on is
Yes.
O-N is how it's meant to be pronounced.
Yes.
But in some writings they talk about how the A, U-M, and then the pause represents the four stages of consciousness, which you also talked about.
That's what I talked about also last time. Yes.
So
Yes.
why is it then that we have the two versions, the two spellings? How has that come into being? Because some people use A, some people use the O-N.
Yeah. In Sanskrit, first of all, in English you have these two different spellings, A-U-M. In Sanskrit, you can only write it in one way, which is Om, because the very fundamental grammatical rule in Sanskrit language is that you cannot write A and U subsequent to each other. It's just not possible. In Sanskrit language, there is only one word, which is an extremely ancient word, and most likely is not a Sanskrit word, but was introduced in extreme antiquity from another language, which is because it is a word for something used very commonly, and that is why most likely it's not a Sanskrit word, but it is used in the Vedas, tita-u. Tita-u. What you find here is tita, a, and u. Both u after a, separate. This is the only Sanskrit word in the world. And tita-u is the Sanskrit word for, I don't know how you call it in English, to clean the chaff of the seeds, the sieve, by which they, and then the chaff goes away and you just have the seeds. Sieve. Sieve. Is it called sieve?
So it's the tool.
Sorry?
It's the tool used.
Yeah, it's the tool. Yes. It is that, we call it, in Hindi language, we call it soup. Soup. Earlier we used to have it.
But traditionally it's not a soup because traditionally the wind is used. So when you do this, it's not falling into a hole.
Yeah, it's the wind.
The shaft goes with the wind.
With the
and
wind.
seed stays in the...
Exactly.
That's not a sieve.
Okay, then it's not a sieve. Okay. Yeah. They used to make it very beautifully out of reed and, very, very beautiful. Very, it's still, even in India and countryside it is widely used. In Hindi we call it soup. In Sanskrit language, one word, tita-u, is used where a-u, these two words, these two letters, the letter u is used subsequently after a. Otherwise, grammatically, you cannot have this construction in Sanskrit language, a-u. This is not possible. The moment you write a and u next to each other, they change into o. Because o is actually the merging of a and u into one. And the important, in English language, the way om is written is, it is still two letters, but the way it is written in Sanskrit language, it is one letter. And this oneness of om has been extremely important for them because this is it is important in the context because A stood for awareness, for consciousness in the waking state of consciousness. U stood for the consciousness in the dreaming state of consciousness. Ma stood for consciousness in deep sleep. And the silence which follows was a symbol to the consciousness in the deepest state of meditation. Now the point is that all these four seemingly different consciousnesses are in reality just one and the same. So it is that oneness, the recognition of oneness in distinction is what is most important for the Upanishadic masters. The recognition of the oneness of consciousness. That, yes, and it is applied in the same way, even to the letters, A, U, Ma. For the Upanishadic masters, we will see this later when we will discuss. Ultimately, A, U, Ma, these three letters are nothing but different manifestations of one letter A. There is only, what arises is just, that is why A is the first letter in most of, at least Indo-European languages. Because that's the fundamental foundational letter. Just you change it, A arises up to here, it's A. And then from here, you change something in your mouth, in your lips, so the sound changes. But it's always A, which changes as U, E, but it's A. It's always A, ultimately, at the very foundation. So it's the awareness of this oneness, or when they speak, for example, the three lights. The light on the earthly region is fire, the thunderbolt in the intermediate region, and the light in the heavenly region is the sun. And meditation on three, the ultimate thing is the experience of the oneness of the principle of light in all these three manifestations. So whenever the masters speak of three, for them the most important thing, the three letters, because these three letters of Om symbolize so many different things. But each time it has to lead to the recognition of the oneness underlying the three manifestations. And that is why Om as one letter, as one symbol, is so much important. Because it is that oneness which is the most important thing. To transcend this apparent seeming difference between the many and become aware of that inherent oneness underlying the many. And that is why there has been so much emphasis from the very ancient times that Om, the one letter, even in English language, that is why we use the word monosyllable. Monosyllable. It's mono. Or in Gita, for example, Omiti ekaksharam, ekakshara, one akshara, one letter. This idea of oneness, finding the three. Like in Christianity, the oneness of the Trinity was fundamental to the Christian traditions. In the same way here, the oneness of these three seemingly different states of consciousness, but they are ultimately one and the same. That oneness is the most important thing. The recognition of that oneness is the most important thing. And that is why it has been so important for the Vedic masters that Om as a symbol, even one of the Upanishads make a statement that as long as someone meditates on the different letters separately, he is still meditating on something that is within the realm of death. But as soon as one starts to meditate on the one letter, then he starts approaching the realm of the immortal. This is how they have expressed the idea in one of the Upanishads. So the idea of, that is why that idea of oneness is extremely important behind the letter Om. And that is why pronouncing it as it's O nasal. One letter O in its nasal form. Because according to Sanskrit grammar, each and every vowel can have a nasal and a non-nasal form. In fact, every vowel in Sanskrit language, you would be amazed, every vowel, just A, has 18 forms. 18 forms. And that's a different thing. So Om is that nasal form of O. It is one letter in its nasal form. Because that nasal part of that is extremely important because it adds to the vibration and it leads towards complete silence. Silence follows inevitably. So hope that answers the question. Yes?
When you say that it's pronounced nasal, as soon as you pronounce a vocal nasal, it happens that you add an overtone. Is there any explanation like, okay, if it's this step of overtone, that's no, as soon as you change a bit, the overtone is changing?
Yeah,
Do you understand my question?
No.
If you pronounce O
Yes.
in a nasal way,
Yes.
you listen to it, then comes to the normal sound, an overtone out of music. And if you change it a little bit, these overtones change it, but you still pronounce it O. Is there any explanation? You know, some people, if they start to pronounce O and overtones is coming, and it happens because you pronounce it nasal.
I think that nasal, as I pointed out, that ending in ma, that nasal overtone, is extremely important because, again, more than the symbol itself, the silence which follows is the most important thing. And that ultimate pronunciation of, nasal pronunciation of M really closes the mouth and forces one into that silence. And that's that silence is the most important thing, more than the letter in itself. And that is why without that, which in the symbol is referred to as the moon and the dot, which is really the highest aspect of the whole symbol, beyond which there is complete silence. I think that in a way, as a door to that silence, is the most important. Of course, one will become silent also after O, after pronouncing O, and then when the breath is exhausted, you become silent anyway. So silence will be there anyway. But still, ma, the pronunciation of ma really makes one silent, forces that silence on pronunciation, on the pronunciation itself, making us aware of that silence, which is the most important aspect of Om. I think more than not getting lost in the symbol itself, but the silence which follows is the most important aspect of that. If I did not understand your question properly, then please help me to understand, because you were saying about something about the tone.
Would it be possible to say that perhaps the overtones come because in fact we know all the other letters exist?
Perhaps?
Would it be possible to say that the overtones are part of the fact that O in fact contains all other sounds?
Yeah. O contains all other sounds too. Yes, yes. What happens is that this is also something that the masters have discussed, that A arises from here, and O and Ma is actually pronounced from the lips. So all the places of pronunciation are basically between the throat and the lip. So it in itself, in fact, includes all the letters in itself. Somebody raised their hand. Sorry?
I don't understand what you just said.
You don't understand what I just said. What I was saying is that A, the letter A, is pronounced at the very base of the throat. And U, O, that U part of O is pronounced at the lips, with open lips, and Ma then of course is pronounced with closed lips. So you have the first, how do you call them, the first place of origin of letters, and the last place of origin of letters. So in this way, you have covered all the different places of origin in which all the letters are pronounced, and in that sense, within the letter Om itself, all other letters are included. That is what I tried to say. And there are such passages in the in the Upanishads, for example, akaro vai sarva vak. In itself, all speech is hidden. We'll come back to this discussion because it will be pertinent. We'll discuss when we study this mantra. We'll explore a lot more about the ideas that are there in the Upanishads in relation to Om, how it has been used as a symbol, and what significance has been attached to it. Hope that made it clear what I was trying to say. Because in Sanskrit language, the way the letters are listed, each and every letter, one of the first things which we start learning when we start learning Sanskrit grammar is the place of their pronunciation. Where is what is the place of origin? This is what we call shiksha, the modern word for study, for language, because this was the first thing that a student, when he came, what is the place of a? Where is a pronounced? Where is e pronounced? Where is u pronounced? Where is ka, kha, ga, gha? Which ones have alpa prana, have a little bit of prana? Which letters are mahaprana, have a lot of prana? Such as ka is alpa prana, kha is mahaprana, ga is alpa prana, gha is mahaprana. So like this, some are nasal, some are non-nasal. Nga is nasal. So like this, it's a subject in itself. It's one of the 6 limbs of, like there is Ashtanga Yoga, the 8-limbed path of yoga, the 8 limbs of yoga. There were these 6 limbs of the Vedas. And the first one was the science of phonetics, the science of proper pronunciation. Because pronouncing Sanskrit is not easy. Sadly, today, I must say, around 80%, or I would say even 90% of those who pronounce Sanskrit mispronounce it. Even in places, forget about elsewhere in India, even in places like Rishikesh, on mics, all the time, the Sanskrit pronunciation that I hear is just a complete mess. A complete mess. So it's a whole science in itself how to pronounce Sanskrit language correctly, and so I was talking from that viewpoint. So okay. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः. Thank you very much.